Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our webinar this evening. My name's Rachel Kingdon-Saxby. I'm the Head of Communications for the Arnold White Group, and it's my pleasure to be chairing this evening's webinar. With me this evening, I have Ian Foll and John Fairley, who will be taking us through the finer details of the renewable energies aspects of the development at Littleton Green. Before I begin, I'd like to show you how to access the full screen mode and the software for this presentation. So please turn the volume up on your computer to high so that you can hear us, and please enter a full screen mode by clicking down at the bottom. If any of you have any issues with the system, please put it into the questions and one of our technical team will be able to help you. Importantly, at the end of this presentation, there will be the opportunity for you to have your questions answered. So throughout the presentation, please feel free to ask questions on the system here, and our technical team will collate the questions, and at the end of the session, our team of experts will answer them for you. Importantly, differently to our previous webinar, which you may have seen that covered all of the planning aspects of this proposal, this evening's information is restricted to the renewable energy aspects. So if your question relates to a wider planning element, please feel free to ask it anyway, but we will likely take it offline and answer it for you afterwards. Before we begin, I wanted to take a little bit of time for those of you that haven't been on one of our webinars before to give you a brief overview of our business. The Arnold White Group comes from quarrying roots over 100 years ago, and our business has evolved and is now considered to be a pioneer in renewable energy and land development because of our determination to respond to the UK's climate emergency. We know that the UK has committed to being carbon neutral by 2050, and it's developments such as these that make this goal possible. We are proud to create a sustainable community from the ground up. Although founded in land development, the group has a number of divisions that come together for projects like Littleton Green. We have a dedicated renewables team who's been focused on the energy park, providing technical expertise to calculate the size and output of wind turbines and solar arrays. We have a specialist EV charging team who know exactly what is needed to provide power to all electrical vehicles within the community, both at home and in the proposed dedicated EV charging station. We have a specialist team at AW Synergy Boreholes who are able to provide, manage and maintain a network of boreholes to provide ground source heating, cooling and hot water to all the homes in the Littleton Green community. With our team of consultants and in-house specialists, we meticulously design and plan developments such as Littleton Green to have large open spaces dedicated to the promotion of biodiversity where anyone can come to experience the benefits of the natural world. We're different because we are truly committed to a sustainable tomorrow. Ian is soon to be retiring as the Managing Director of our AW Renewables division, and John is already in place to provide a seamless transition into the role. Both Ian and John are experts in the field of renewable energy, and tonight are offering their decades of compound experience, so please do ask them if there is anything you would like to know more about. As I said, differently to our recent planning webinar, this evening is dedicated to renewable energy. So I'm going to hand over to Ian now, who will introduce the world of renewable energy and why it matters.
Hi, good evening. I sincerely hope you're all aware of the threats of climate change on our lives. As we speak to you tonight, the UK has entered a heat wave with the possibility of a record-breaking temperature being hit after the weekend on Monday. In truth, the UK has been at the forefront of pushing legislation and international cooperation to tackle the causes of climate change. And without listing all the legislation, the UK government has committed us to becoming a net zero economy by 2050. So what does that mean? Well, it means that we generate enough renewable energy to offset all the carbon emissions from processes that still require fossil fuels. And what does that challenge look like? Well, the UK has already made large investments in wind and solar energy, as has the AW Group, which means we've already reduced the amount of carbon and greenhouse gases emitted from generating electricity. For instance, the UK uses coal. The UK barely uses coal anymore, whereas 10 years ago, well over a third of our electricity was generated by burning coal. However, To get to net zero, we'll need to decarbonise transport, heating, and of course, many of the energy-hungry industrial processes, such as making steel and glass. We talk about our development proposals at Waddesdon as being operationally net zero carbon, but what does that mean? Well, it's simple really. We'll generate sufficient renewable energy in the form of electricity generated by the wind and sun, and from heat in the ground to supply the development with all the energy it will need throughout the year. In fact, there'll be times when we generate too much energy, which will be exported to the local grid, meaning homes and businesses nearby will be using our excess renewable energy, even if they don't know it. There'll be other times of low wind and no sun when we'll be importing energy from the local grid. But overall, the balance of import and export will mean the development will be operationally net zero. So the key to reducing carbon emissions from new homes is to make the homes very energy efficient in the first place, improve the insulation and the build quality, cut out the leaks that result in energy being lost to the environment, and then make sure that the energy that the home requires is all renewable. But actually, the government has gone further by stating that from 2025, no new homes can be built and connected to the gas network. Instead, they will need to have an entirely renewable energy solution. And it's not just new homes. From 2035, the existing housing stock, i.e. all those homes in Waddesdon, which are connected to the gas or oil, will no longer be able to repair or replace existing boilers with a new gas or oil boiler. They too will need to find a renewable energy solution instead. This is a massive change and one which many people are not yet fully aware of.
This is our draft master plan proposal for Littleton Green. Today, we're talking about the energy element. This is represented by the Energy Centre, which is located at the western end of the site. The Energy Centre is designed to meet the energy requirements of the proposal with, as Ian mentioned, any excess energy supplied to the local grid. The Energy Centre will comprise a 6.2 megawatt wind turbine, a 10 megawatt solar array, a ground source heat array, a battery, and an electric vehicle charging station. I will now run through each of these technologies. These are photographs of our operating wind turbines at Quarrendon, just down the road from Littleton Green, and Double Arches, which is near to Leighton Buzzard. These turbines have operated successfully and without complaint since 2014. Each have a 100-metre tower and an 87-metre rotor diameter, and each generate around 4.5 million units of electricity every year. Next year, we're building a further wind turbine near to Leighton Buzzard, which will have a 115-metre rotor on top of an 89.5-metre tower. Despite only being 4 metres taller than the Double Arches turbine and Quarrendon machines, the generation output will be more than double. This is due to the larger swept area of the rotor. At Littleton Green, we are proposing a 155-metre rotor on top of a 102.5-metre tower. This will generate over 16 million units of electricity every year, so almost 4 times the Quarrendon turbine down the road. The principle behind wind turbine technology is simple. When the wind meets the turbine blades, the rotor turns the generator, which then generates electricity. Our turbines don't have a gearbox. They run just like a bicycle dynamo. Only a small amount of wind is needed to turn the rotor, around 6 miles per hour. The wind turbine will then generate electricity up to wind speeds of around 56 miles per hour. At higher wind speeds, the turbine will shut down to protect the structure. As wind speeds move up and down, the blades will pitch into the wind and out of the wind, just like a sail. This maintains the rotational speed of the turbine to no more than 12 revolutions per minute. Looking at our Quarrendon wind data, we have found there to be too little or too much wind for only 3 to 6% of the year. For the rest of the time, so around 94% of the year, the turbine will generate electricity. In addition to pitching the blades, wind turbines are also able to follow the wind direction, optimizing the available wind. A weather vane on top of the nacelle measures the wind direction and communicates with the yaw drive, which is a drive that turns the nacelle to face the wind whenever the wind direction changes. I mentioned that wind generation varies with wind speed. Similarly, solar generation varies with light levels. We've found, though, that the two technologies complement each other very well when co-located together. When wind generation drops in the summer, solar generation increases. When solar generation stops at night, wind generation tends to pick up the slack. At Littleton Green, we're proposing to install around 10 megawatts of solar to the south of the wind turbine, where it will not be shaded by the turbine. This will generate around 10 million units of electricity every year. The solar array comprises around 20,000 panels. These are similar to the ones that you may have installed on your roof or your garage. However, they are also bifacial. This means that as well as harvesting direct sunlight on the front of the panel, they also harvest light from the back of the panel, ambient light and reflected light. This means that the generation profile is smooth, it's more efficient compared to standard monofacial panels. The panels are mounted onto frames facing south at a fixed angle of around 25 degrees. Inverters located behind the panels convert the DC solar electricity into AC electricity. Each row of panels will be around 4.5 meters apart. This ensures that the row in front doesn't shade the row behind. And it also provides us with the opportunity to establish meadow and graze the area between the rows. We can also use this land to provide heat through our borehole array. As Ian mentioned earlier, from 2025, new building regulations will prevent newly built properties from being connected to a fossil fuel energy source, such as the gas network. It's therefore necessary to find alternative means to heat our homes. One solution is to install an ambient heat network alongside ground source heat pumps. This utilizes the heat naturally occurring within the ground. When the sun's energy reaches the earth, some of it is captured and stored as heat in the ground. This is known as ground heat. At depths of around 200 to 250 meters, this heat remains at a steady temperature, regardless of the temperature on the surface. You may have experienced this yourself if you visited a mine or an underground cave system. It's this sustainable solar heat energy that's harvested using an array of boreholes at a steady temperature of around 14 degrees. A ground source heat network then distributes this energy to heat homes and offices. A ground source heat pump in each property then steps the temperature up to around 50 degrees, providing heating and hot water. We intend to locate the borehole array within the solar park, thus harvesting electricity and heat from the same part of the site. In the summer months, on days like today, the ground source heat pump can run in reverse, and it can also provide cooling to the house, which is increasingly important as we experience the effects of climate change. Our energy park will not only provide renewable energy and heat, it will also support the move towards sustainable transport. We know that electric vehicles need to be powered by renewable energy to be truly green, so it's our job to harness the power from wind and sun to deliver it straight to the vehicles wherever we can. We want to help electric vehicle drivers to feel confident that by using our charging stations, their cars' onward journeys won't be contributing to carbon emissions. Our vision is that drivers will be able to watch the actual turbine that generates the electricity that they're using to charge their car. Next month, we commence the construction of the UK's first electric vehicle and electric bus charging station to be powered directly from on-site renewable energy. The Checkley Wood electric vehicle charging station will be located on the A5 near to Leighton Buzzard. The site will be powered via a battery by our new wind turbine. A smart switch will switch the power supply between the turbine and the battery, ensuring that the vehicles will be charged by renewable energy. We want to repeat this project at Littleton Green. The station will provide ultra-rapid charging at power levels that are matched to the capabilities of the car that plugs into it, ensuring that motorists can carry on with their onward journey as quickly as possible. To summarize, this system diagram illustrates how our energy park works. Electricity generated by the wind turbine and the solar array feed into the AW energy side of the site substation. When the energy park is generating, power will feed directly into the homes and facilities on the site. Power is also directed towards the EV charging station via the battery. During times of low generation, or indeed no generation, the power is supplemented using power from the grid. However, our energy park will generate more energy on an annual basis than is utilised by the development, and will export the excess power to the local grid. As Ian mentioned earlier, this will then be used by local homes and businesses in the area. Many thanks.
Thank you so much, John and Ian, for that incredibly informative presentation. Now, as promised and discussed at the start, we've been keeping a note of all of your questions. If anybody has any questions they haven't yet asked, please do feel free to use the questions function at the bottom of your screen, and we will take a note of them and try to answer as many as we can. As I said, if we have questions that have come in about the wider planning application, we may well take these offline and refer them to the specialists who can help. But for the time being, I will field the questions to our resident experts that we have in this evening. So to kick off, John, will local residents be disturbed by the turbine?
We've currently undertaken some environmental surveys across the site, including background noise surveys, to ensure that we meet the requirements and noise levels to ensure that residents will not be disturbed by the turbine. A great example is down the road at Quarrendon Fields, next to the Berryfields development. The nearest house to that turbine is around 500 metres, and to date we haven't had any noise issues associated with that turbine. What you find is noise levels from a turbine increase and decrease with wind speed, and we ensure that we stay within the parameters that the government define, which makes sure that there is not a noise nuisance at any nearby dwelling. So I'm very confident there will not be any noise problems associated with the scheme.
Thank you very much. Ian, one for you. Why both wind and solar?
Well, that's a good question. Generally, as a rule of thumb, during the winter, the wind blows and it blows well, and the turbines are operating at full tilt, and that's day and night. And during the summer, the wind tends to fall off, particularly during the daytime. And look at a day like today, very little wind, but you get more sunshine in the summer. So you get this complementary effect of where you've got that match of both wind energy during the winter and solar energy during the summer, and at night time the wind is doing the work. So it's that complementary effect of the two.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you very much. John, your turn. Why is there an obsession with renewable energy, please?
Renewable energy is an essential form of energy if we are to maintain the lifestyles that we want to maintain. Currently, to date, the vast majority of our energy supply has been supplied by fossil fuels, including coal and gas. Indeed, I'd say roughly about half, sometimes up to 2/3 of our electricity system is fired by gas. We've all seen the effects of gas prices recently and the ongoing effects on costs of energy. So gas is actually an incredibly expensive way of providing electricity to our homes. So renewable energy not only provides and helps assist with climate change issues, it also provides low-cost energy, homegrown energy, or indeed home-blown energy to supply our own homes and businesses at a low cost and carbon-free.
That's great. Thank you very much. There's actually a second question from the same person, which leads on quite nicely. So I'll ask it of you, if that's okay as well, John, please. Does this mean that we as local existing residents will get cheaper electricity bills?
Unfortunately, the way that the UK electricity system is set up and regulated, we aren't currently able to offer cheaper electricity to local homes, and that's because we aren't able to supply domestic consumers without being a large energy supplier. However, There is currently an energy bill going through Parliament which has a lot of support, which is looking to find ways and means to enable companies such as ourselves to sell our energy to the local area. And that is exactly what we would like to do. So by we get down the road and we build the scheme, we are hopeful that we will be able to make that offering to local people. But at this stage, we can't guarantee that.
Okay, thank you very much for that. That's helpful. Ian, what has the local reaction been for other turbines? Please.
Oh, that's another very good question. Funny enough, I live in a small village in North Buckinghamshire, and there was a wind farm proposed where I live 10 years ago, and everyone was up in arms about it beforehand. I was a lone voice in the pub supporting it. And once it was built, it just became part of the landscape, and people happily live with it. And that's what we've found with where we've developed wind turbines. In fact, actually in Aylesbury, they talk about the Quarrendon wind turbines being our turbine, and that's often the case, where once you've built these things and they're generating, they become part of the landscape, they become a feature, and people take ownership of it. And it's such a positive thing to see. You know that energy is being generated when you see the blades turning, and you know that that energy being generated is doing no damage to the environment. It's clean, renewable energy. So yeah, the reaction actually tends to be a very positive one.
Okay, thank you. That's very, very helpful. So something that is similar but different, an extension of that. So we've had a question about a local resident who likes the idea of the renewable energy but is unsure about the development, and is asking why the development is where it is and why there's a need for housing alongside renewable energy. Please.
Okay, well, I think in terms of the housing, the fact is there is a critical housing crisis right across England and the UK. It's very acute in the home counties, and so there is a need for finding sites for new homes, and inevitably there will be villages which will end up taking large numbers of homes. There are all sorts of planning constraints which might make that difficult. The Greenbelt's a particular example, and here, for instance, we're outside the Greenbelt. But the key really is, if you're going to allocate homes and develop homes in and around villages, then it is to deliver the facilities that will make the village a better village, that will improve the quality of life of people who live there. And furthermore, ensure that that is a zero carbon development, because if it is, then it means the residents who live in these homes will have a much better lifestyle, a healthier lifestyle, and a cheaper lifestyle to live in, because the homes will be better performing than, for instance, the existing housing stock in Waddesdon. We'll have lots of homes in Waddesdon which are old estate homes, homes that were built in the 50s and the 70s, which will be energy very, very poor, and that is an expense to householders. A lot of those homes in Waddesdon are also owned by the estate and are not owner occupied, and this gives an opportunity for people to own their own home, an energy efficient home, with all the energy coming from renewable energy sources. So it's a combined effect that makes it a really good development.
Thank you very much. John, we've had a question come in as a follow-up to your answer about prices for electricity. The question reads, can anyone use the electric charging system? So I'm going to interpret that to mean the EV charging for electric vehicles. Can you help shed some light on that, please?
Absolutely. Future building regulations will require every new home to be fitted with an electric car charger, whatever the case. However, the EV charging station is there as a public facility, so it will provide you with the opportunity to rapid charge very quickly and carry on with your journey. The charging technology that we use matches specifically to your car. So if, for example, you buy a Renault Zoe or you buy a Tesla, both charge at very different rates and very different styles. This charging system will make sure that your car charges at the optimal rate. Typically, the sort of thing we're looking for is around 200 miles in about 15 minutes, which is really quick, and it allows you to carry on with your day with very minimal disruption.
Okay, great, thank you. Next question, John, for you, please. Will the development be net zero carbon, or will it have better credentials than that?
When we set out to design the scheme, we set out to ensure that operationally the homes and the facilities on the site would be net zero from the beginning. However, to guarantee that, you'll notice that the turbine is 6.2 megawatts, the solar farm's 10 megawatts, would generate a lot of excess energy. That excess energy, when you think of the system diagram I showed you earlier, export into the local grid. That local grid can only be, the energy in that grid can only be used by people in the local area. So in effect, it bumps the local area up. It's a bit like an offsetting arrangement. So if you imagine you've got solar panels on your garage and they're generating electricity, then you import less from the grid. It's exactly the same situation when we are pushing energy out of our scheme. Your local area will import less from the grid. So effectively, what we're looking to do is operationally, hopefully be carbon negative, because we'll be able to actually address carbon issues in the wider area, not just in the new development.
Thank you, John. Ian, I have a follow-up question for you relating to the location of the development and the energy park. Specifically, why solar and turbine are where they are, and why we're not looking to place them at the Westcott Venture Park.
Oh, that's a good question. The Westcott Venture Park already has a solar farm on it, which is good. This is not a binary issue at all. For the UK to become a zero carbon economy, we need substantial amount of renewable energy. And it's not a question of here or there, it's a question of renewable energy wherever renewable energy can be sited. So if you look at the moment, the UK total percentage of renewables is about a third of all the energy that's generated in terms of electricity, but that ignores heat and that ignores transportation. So the challenge for the UK to become a zero carbon economy is huge, absolutely huge. And we are seeing applications and consent for enormous offshore wind farms, which are really important. We're seeing applications for enormous solar farms, and that becomes a bit more controversial, I think. When you have areas of land almost the whole size of Waddesdon going under glass, then you get into the debate about should you be growing food on that land rather than having solar panels. The great advantage of a turbine is you get an enormous amount of output of energy for very little land. As we said earlier, we want to complement both the summer and the winter. So we take land for both solar and the wind to get that maximum output and least land take. But so it's not a question of Westcott or Waddesdon, it's a question of Westcott and Waddesdon, and no doubt other places as well.
Okay, thank you very much for that. John, another question for you, please. What are the timetables for this? How quickly will it happen?
Currently, we're looking at a planning application being submitted later this year. All being well, we would hope for a decision towards the middle to end of next year. If that's the case, we would seek to commence construction of the energy centre pretty quickly after that, because what we'd like to do is to provide the energy and make sure that energy centre is in place so that when the first home is switched on, its energy needs are being met straight away. So we're looking at an application later this year, hopefully a positive decision towards the middle to end of next year, which would then allow us to start commencement of construction of the energy centre.
Okay, thank you very much. So there's an associated question with that one, and in fact 2 associated questions. So Ian, if I may, who decides the outcome of these proposals, and has this application already been decided?
Okay. So the decision maker is the planning authority, and if that was a controversial or appeal decision, it could end up with the Secretary of State. But so the decision is with the planning authority in the first place. And has it already been decided? No, not at all. It will requires a planning application first. And that is a very public process. So the application will be advertised locally, and the public have the opportunity to write and consult and make comments. And so this really is very, very early days in that process. And part of what we want to achieve from these webinars is that consultation process, getting information out so people understand what we're proposing, but also to seek views and opinions of locals, because that's just as important. And that helps shape the application that we'll be submitting.
Okay, thank you very much. John, I think we're on to the last one for you, unless any more questions come in. We've got a couple more to go through. So a technical one for you. How reliable is the new technology that we're looking to use?
The new technology is incredibly reliable. Wind turbines have been operating in the UK now since the early 90s. Indeed, I've been working in wind since then, and I found that turbines operate incredibly reliably. I mean, our turbines at Leighton Buzzard and at Quarrendon have the highest availability, so they're ready to generate of the manufacturer's fleet, and that's something that we're extremely proud of. Again, solar technology, very well established. It's been around for a long time. It's become more and more efficient over time, and it's an accessible technology that some people watching this seminar possibly already use. Even if it's not on your house, it'll be on a calculator, it'll be somewhere. Solar technology is very well established. In terms of the heat arrays aren't necessarily a new thing. In the UK, there's a ground source heat system that's been operating in Southampton since the early 90s. That provides district heat to part of the city. So all of this is established technology. What is new is the way that we're bringing it together to address the needs of a development and a wider community.
Thank you very much, John. Ian, last one for you. Just dwelling on this for a little bit, because it's clearly very important to our audience this evening, and obviously very important to us as well. Why houses, and has the local council been consulted?
There has been some consultation, informal consultation. There'll be more formal consultation than obviously planning application. But why homes? Well, you know, we have a housing crisis, as I mentioned earlier, and people need homes to live in. Watson has its own reasons for acquiring more homes, but in general speaking, councils have got to find land for significant numbers of homes, and we'll be putting forward this site as one of those sites to satisfy that housing need. We often see it on developments where we've owned the land before and we've developed the land and people have moved in and they're looking at across a quarry or green fields. They then fight the next green field because they say, that's my view, that's my countryside gone. But actually, it's just part and parcel of development. And if you look at any town or any village, you will see that there is housing from different eras that have fulfilled the needs of that local village. And if you don't build homes and if you don't keep things going, then ultimately the community will decline. So this is part and parcel of delivering housing need and for improving the facilities within the village.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Ian. I think we've just got one more question that's coming in, so bear with me just 1 second, please. Okay. John or Ian, either of you, I think you've had a fair amount this evening. What other benefits will be associated with this site?
If you flick backwards towards the slide that shows the master plan, you'll see on there that there is provision of a significant amount of green space, parkland and woodland, as well as the hotel and conference facilities. There'll also be a care and community hub, which is looking to provide healthcare and also facilities for the elderly. And we're also looking to provide a school as well as part of the development. So once you start to bring all of these developments together, we're really we're providing a community and a community that is sustainable, and not only is its energy needs met, but we're able to provide play areas, parkland, green space, care, and somewhere to be safe as you grow old. So really we see this as a sustainable community, but also a sustainable net zero community.
Okay, thank you both very much for the answers to those questions. I will just pause in proceedings just for a moment to allow anybody to ask any questions that they still have burning. But whilst we wait for those to come in, if there are any more, I just wanted to remind everybody that's viewing and visiting with us this evening that this webinar is being recorded, and we will publish this webinar alongside the first webinar that we issued on the website, so that if you know of anybody that would like to view the contents of this webinar, then they can see it at any time after publication, which will happen in the next couple of days. Additionally, if you are looking for further information on the scheme that hasn't been provided on the webinar this evening, you are very welcome to visit www.littleton.green, which is the website that holds all of our vision documents and has a host of frequently asked questions and specifics about this particular proposal. So if your question can't be answered there or in our original webinar, then please don't hesitate to contact the contact details on the website. I've just got another question that's just been thrown over to me, so please bear with me while I ask this one. Okay, so this is just a question to ask about, again, the process and the timescales. So I'm just going to hand over to John just to restate those, please.
Okay, so currently we are undertaking an environmental impact assessment of the proposed development. That is looking at all aspects of the scheme, from landscape to visual to noise to sustainability, transport and highways. That assessment is currently being pulled together, and that will allow us to prepare and submit a planning application, hopefully during this summer. Once that application is in, the local planning authority will have statutory requirement of 16 weeks to determine that application, because it's an EIA application. At the end of that 16 weeks, well, during that 16 weeks even, they will consult with the communities, they will consult with statutory consultees, parish councils, and the planning officer will collect the views of everybody and bring it together into an officer's report with a recommendation to approve or refuse the application. That recommendation would be put to your planning committee, your elected members, who will then debate and determine the scheme. So all being well, timescale wise, if we submit the application, say midsummer, we'll be looking at a decision in theory 16 weeks later. Normally in practice, it takes longer for the various consultation responses to come together and for everything to be collated into the officer's report. So we could be looking at a decision maybe March, April next year if things were to go very smoothly. From that, it would then be up to the elected members to decide the project, and if they approve it, because of the size of the scheme, the Secretary of State may take a look and decide whether they're happy with that decision, and then grant award planning consent. That would enable us to start looking at the energy park towards the end of next year, if not early the following year.
Thank you very much, John. That was very helpful. All that remains for me to say is thank you very much to everybody for attending this evening's webinar, and thank you for contributing so thoroughly with such insightful and invested questions. It makes this process very much better for everybody the more we have the local community involved. So we thank you for your time this evening and for your level of investment in this process. This isn't the end. I've just been given a note to say, please remember to say that this isn't the end. This isn't the end. We will be publishing more information on the website as we go through the process and updating. So please don't forget to visit www.littleton.green for more information. And as I say, there are contact details on there should you want to contact us directly. Thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Have a good evening.